Hey class, my name is James Knight, and I'm doing my presentation on Chapter 29, Crisis Management. So the objective is to define crisis and discuss the different types of crises, to do an overview of the level of crises from broad to local, to address critical incidents by surveying justice theories, and discussing the four frames of crisis management strategies per the book. In addition, I also will be discussing ACPA and NASPA competencies, as well as some crisis management develop opportunities. This presentation follows the ACPA standards listed here, as well as the primary source is the book, the textbook, of course, and chapter 29. Crisis is defined by the book as an event, often sudden or unexpected, that disrupts the normal operations of the institution or its education mission and threatens the well-being of personal, property, financial resources, and or reputation of the institution. The book defines three types of crisis. One is environmental, like we just seen with the hurricane that shut us down for over a month and a half, and some news reports said it did between 75 to 150 million dollars in damage. The other is facilities. Some of those facility problems were a result of the hurricane, but that's the overall physical infrastructure of the campus. And the third is the one we'll be focusing on today, which is the human element of crisis. And the relevant course for this understanding is, I'd speculate, 555, legal issues in higher education. The level of crisis is descending as catastrophes. This is the most severe, with increased and long-lasting damage we've seen with the hurricane. We move down the rings to disasters, which permeate campus borders and extend into the surrounding communities, but it's not national or as big as a catastrophe. It then goes to campus emergencies, which affects the life of the campus, but it's confined within its borders. And critical incidents, which is what we'll be discussing, is confined to a particular segment of the campus. Relevant courses in discussing this, I believe, would be 553, Evaluation and Assessments in Higher Education, because that will assess the programs and the process that we use to respond to these crises. Critical incidents, they are certain to arise throughout the whole year. Unlike a hurricane that may hit every few years, anyone that works in student affairs has probably already had a number of these semester alone. There's no universal approaches, but there are some theories and strategies for approaching crisis. And as student affairs professionals, we have to understand the theory and strategies in order to develop the skills. And we must also be able to distinguish between the different types and levels of crisis, which is discussed in Dr. Walker's student development theory. He's my first acquaintance that I'm using. He's also the dean of students that handles conduct issues and such things if conflicts can't be resolved within, lower levels. Three types of theories: distributive, social, restorative. I'm sure these will be discussed in 552 in critical issues in higher education. The first is distributive justice. This is the distribution of goods and resources such as space, money, support, supplies, the tangible things, the things that everyone needs that makes college college. We all have to eat. We all need a place to live. We all need the money to go to school and buy the technology that we need. And in distributive justice makes an assumption that there's just a certain amount of fairness within the system. Injustice occurs when there's a disproportionate amount of resources going to any person or group. Examples of this are admissions, financial aid, the availability of learning resources, student housing, food, scholarships, even parking. In my other two professional acquaintances that I know is Miss Shannon Mills in financial aid and Miss Teresa White, who is assistant to the registrar, who has to use distributive justice pretty much all day long professionally. And I believe that 555 legal issues in higher education would discuss distributive justice fairly well. Social justice has its own course, 558, Social Justice Topics in Higher Education. And unlike distributive justice, this is justice dependent more upon self-respect, dignity, recognition of rights, and opportunities. social justice can be viewed as a process and goal that addresses institutions that are assumed to have a certain amount of embedded oppression in it. Issues that may arise are any issues that pertain to race, gender, age, sexual orientation, religion, nationality, mental or physical ability, which translates to me as an unjust social hierarchy of distributive injustice, discrimination, real or perceived, hostility in classrooms and housings, feelings of exclusion and segregation, and a sense of inferiority and decreased self-worth, a lack of diversity in faculty, and just overall reinforces the dominant culture of campus. For those who would like to go to Washington or Seattle, next year on the 19th, between the 27th and the 30th, is a convention of how to lead in student affairs with a racial and social justice lens. The one that we'll be concerned about primarily when mediating conflicts and crises with students is restorative justice. Restorative justice acknowledges shared processes that give rise to actions of individuals. Its three principles go as follows. There must be opportunities for a wrong to be articulated by victims and acknowledged by the offender. So let's say the victim is kept up at night because the offender is playing music until 2 in the morning. I know this is very simple and non-controversial, but they can both acknowledge that. The second step, through an apology, equity needs to be restored to all persons. So the offender could be like, sorry I play music to 2 in the morning. This way resolution can start. 3, there must be a creative plan on behalf of the community or the administrator to address key questions about the future of this problem. So we'll come to the conclusion that, you'll no longer play music until 2 o'clock in the morning. Large amount of relevant courses in this, 551, 552, 558. I'm sure pretty much every EDL course addresses this. So applying it as a framework, one of the quotes from the book that I like is, the key gift that leaders can offer in pursuit of justice is sharing power. So therefore, we must avoid a position of power and authority. Try not to be the judge, jury, and executioner. Acknowledge that each party has a perspective. So in this example, this person's kept up to 2, but also, this other person may not think that his music's very loud and, can't sleep without music. And then acknowledge the validity of each of those perspectives and that those 2 individuals shares power to influence the resolution. The activity in the books is naming, framing, blaming, taming. So name the conflict, give the conflict boundaries that are relevant to the conflict. So therefore, the person can't be complaining about this guy playing music because he got in a fight with his mom earlier. It had to be pertaining to the issue. Blaming assigns the shared responsibilities and then bringing the conflict to a closure. I believe the course we're in, 560, addresses this situation pretty well. And in order to do that, student affairs needs skills. We got to be effective communicators. We have to identify with multiple perspectives and understand all sides, and we have to have integrity and lead with ethical decisions. The ability to acknowledge opportunities presented by a crisis for the personal and organizational growth and development. So here is the 4 frames of crisis management. It's a lot on one slide. I probably should have separated it out, but the first one is hospitality. I heard a person say once, that empathy makes bad policy. Therefore, it's easy to, because of this person standing in front of you, create a policy that could harm 1,000 other people. So the best way to approach this is hospitality. It's unsentimental, efficacious love. So have sympathy for people, but, don't necessarily empathize with the person to the point to where you make bad or biased decisions. The second is critical thinking, the how, shoulds, of a crisis management. How a situation has been, how long has he been playing music in the morning until 2? How a situation is now, that's probably why they're there. How a situation should be, well, he should stop playing music. And how society should be. We should live in a society where people don't play music until 2 in the morning if it hurts other people. how a situation should be morally, ethically, and practically. He should know that it's morally wrong to do that if it bothers that person. Third is emotional intelligence. We have to be able to perceive emotion, use emotion to facilitate thought, understand emotions, and manage emotions. The managing and understanding of emotion applies intrinsically as well as to the students. And the fourth is charity. It's also renamed the principle of fairness. In this idea, you give the student the benefit of the doubt. You are generous with their intentions. Therefore, by starting on that premise, you're not starting with any hostility or any bias against the person, and you're more objective in your mediating skills. And this is pretty much foundational in third-party mediations. All right, so on the right is the NASPA and ACPA professional competencies. I don't really have time to explain each of the 10, but I went and put the words above them and color-coded it. For the theories, they're all in the yellow, I believe. Personal and ethic foundation, values, philosophy, and history apply to all three of them because they're justice theories. But for the distributive, we can see as to where the organizational and human resources and leadership, the more tangible things, apply more to theory. But as it goes in from the foundational toward the intermediate and advanced, we can kind of see how leadership ties in with social justice and technology. And the whole goal is that by the time you get to the center, a student affairs competent professional should be able to do all 10 of these things in light of these justice theories. I have social justice, which is at the bottom. Social justice is inclusion. And restorative justice, you see in the purple, which is kind of more about like student development, advising, and supporting in the law, policy, and governments. Those are the more like structural, administrative sides. Applying the same premise to the 4 frames of crisis management, we can see as to where the hospitality, the unsentimental, efficacious love kind of applies more to the organizational and human resources and the law and policy. But moving around, you can see as to where the critical thinking kind of applies more to the philosophical values and the more sociological premises, and how when those sort of start to tie in with the policies as it moves from the foundational to the intermediate to the advanced, to where it's all mixed together. And then we have the emotional intelligence, which is good for advising and supporting. Again, if you haven't read the ACPA competencies, you should in order to be able to understand this better. And student learning and development. And finally, charity. Charity, I believe, lies kind of with critical thinking, with the more sociological and philosophical areas. 4, here's my 2, 3, 4, and 5 areas of opportunity development. First is FEMA. You go online, they have training for national and natural disasters. You can get online certifications. You can set it up to where your school or your department can receive it. For disasters, I'm putting active shooters in this category because any active shooter now does permeate the campus boundaries. If there's an active shooter at UNCW, it affects the whole community. And the UNCW police offer training every second Wednesday and every fourth Wednesday of the month. It's very short. There's really no reason that we shouldn't be able to go at least once or twice to these trainings. For campus emergencies, I'm putting the International Crisis Incident Stress Foundation, which provides comprehensive regional opportunities for crisis management and development with a specific emphasis on critical incidents exclusively. It's for a variety of professions, but it's also for the education system as well. And this is a good way to start thinking about incident stress crisis as separate from the others. Finally, critical incidents, on-campus incidents. If you really want some development, I encourage you to volunteer and undergo training to become a care peer educator. And that way you can work with and advocate for victims of sexual assault, dating and domestic violence, stalking, and harassment. Now, these are quickly the standards that I used. And, here's pretty much my references. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching my presentation. I hope you did manage to learn something, and if you have any questions about this chapter or these issues, feel free to contact me.